If I'd known what was going to happen that Saturday, I probably wouldn't have rolled out of bed so casually. I wouldn't have dragged myself to the kitchen in just my shorts, hair a mess, still scratching sleep from my eyes. But I didn't know. It just felt like another regular weekend in a quiet house. "Hey," Darren said, as I passed the kitchen table. He was sitting there with a mug in one hand, his reading glasses in the other, and the sports section folded neatly in front of him. "You busy this afternoon?" I grabbed a banana from the fruit bowl, shook my head. "Not really. Why?" He set the mug down with a soft clink. "Got some stuff to take care of in the garage. Could use a hand if you're up for it." Now, here's the thing. You wouldn't call Darren the bonding type. He was practical, quiet, the kind of guy who fixed things without being asked, and never made a big deal about anything. When he married my mom 3 years ago, I didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat, but over time we'd found a rhythm. Not father and son exactly, but not strangers either. Still, he'd never really asked me to hang out, not like this. Yeah. "Sure," I said, chewing the first bite of banana. "What are we doing?" He glanced at me, then stood up, stretching his arms behind his back until his shoulders cracked. "Just moving a few things around. Got a shelf to fix. Nothing crazy." I told him I'd change and meet him out there. As I walked back to my room, I tried not to read too much into it, but something about the way he'd looked at me, longer than usual, like he was sizing me up for more than just help with a toolbox, stuck in my head. By the time I made it to the garage, he'd already pulled a few things out into the driveway, a couple boxes, a folded up ladder, and a bunch of tools laid out in that perfectly neat way he always did things. He was wearing jeans and a dark gray t-shirt that hugged his chest and arms just enough to notice. His hands were already dirty, like he'd been out here longer than I thought. "Grab that end," he said, nodding to a wooden shelving unit that looked half collapsed. "Let's move it over by the wall." We lifted it together, side by side. His arm brushed mine as we carried it. A small thing. I didn't flinch, but I noticed. I always noticed with him. As we worked, the air between us filled with little sounds. His low grunts as he adjusted a wrench, the scuff of my sneakers on the cement, the occasional hum from the old radio he kept on a shelf. No music, just static and soft sports talk. After a while, we stopped to drink some water. I sat on the workbench while he leaned against the open garage door, arms crossed, sipping from a bottle. The sunlight caught the side of his face, and for a moment he looked younger. Not like the guy who'd helped raise me through high school, just a man, one who seemed lost in thought. "You doing okay?" he asked suddenly, without looking at me. "Yeah. Why?" he shrugged. "Just seems like you've been in your head lately." I hesitated. "I guess. It's been a weird summer." "College stuff?" I nodded. "Yeah, that, and I don't know, just figuring some stuff out." He looked over at me then, and his eyes lingered in that way again. The silence between us stretched, but not in a bad way. "You know," he said slowly, "you can talk to me, if you ever need to." "I know," I said, though I wasn't sure if I really did. Darren wasn't the kind of guy who offered those words often, and when he did, they usually meant more than what they sounded like on the surface. Then he pushed off the wall and walked back toward the workbench. He picked up a drill and handed it to me, his hand brushing mine. "You trust me to teach you how to use this without putting a hole in the wall?" he asked, smirking. I laughed. "Guess we're about to find out." It was just a touch, just a laugh. But something about the way he was watching me didn't feel fatherly. And that's when it started. Not with a kiss, not with some dramatic confession, but with a quiet moment in the garage. Just me, my stepdad, a broken shelf, and something thick in the air neither of us wanted to name yet. It's funny how silence can say more than words ever could. We didn't talk much while working. Darren showed me how to drill into the studs, how to level the shelf just right, and where to brace the back. He wasn't overly chatty, just gave instructions, stepped in when needed, and nodded when I got something right. But his energy was different. Focused, sure, but there was something more. A kind of alertness, like he was aware of me in a way that hadn't been there before. I started to notice things I'd never paid attention to. The veins in his forearms when he lifted the heavier tools. The way his shirt clung to his lower back when he leaned forward. The way he'd glance at me when he thought I wasn't looking. And the thing was, I was doing the same. Watching, measuring distance, noticing. I don't think I was imagining it. "So," he said finally, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, "you dating anyone?" The question caught me off guard. Not really," I said, voice casual. But my heartbeat had already kicked up a notch. He nodded, like that didn't surprise him. "Just asking." "You're a good-looking guy. Smart. I figured you had someone." I didn't say anything at first, just crouched to pick up a couple of screws that had fallen onto the floor. I could feel his eyes on me though, waiting for something. "I guess I've been figuring out what I even want," I said, voice lower this time. Another pause. "That's fair," he said. Then added, "Takes some of us longer than others." When I stood, he was closer than I expected. Not uncomfortably close. Just there. We were both sweaty, tired, but neither of us seemed ready to end whatever this was. He looked down at my hands. "You've got grease on your wrist." "Oh, yeah." I tried to wipe it on my shirt, but it just smeared. "Here," he said, grabbing a rag from the bench. He stepped closer, took my wrist gently in his hand, and started wiping the grease off. I froze. His touch wasn't rough. It was slow, careful. Too careful to mean nothing. We didn't speak while he cleaned my wrist. The only sound was the soft scrubbing of the rag and the hum of the fan behind us. His thumb brushed the inside of my arm, just slightly, and I swear something tightened in my chest. When he was done, he didn't let go right away. Our eyes met. He didn't say anything like, "What are we doing?" or "We shouldn't." That wasn't his style. But his fingers lingered just long enough for me to know he wasn't in a rush to step back either. Then finally, he let go and looked down, clearing his throat. "I should clean up a bit," he said. "You can go rest if you want." "Actually," I said, before I even knew what I was doing, "I'll stay, if that's okay." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." We didn't talk much after that. Just moved around the garage, tidying up, coiling extension cords, sweeping dust into the corner. But the energy had shifted, like we'd crossed some invisible line and both silently agreed not to step back. At one point, I bent down to unplug the shop vac, and when I turned around, Darren was watching me again. His eyes flicked away when he realized I'd caught him. "You hungry?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not really." "Thirsty?" I hesitated. Kind of. He walked over to the mini fridge in the corner, opened it, and tossed me a cold bottle of water. I caught it, the condensation already slick in my palm. As I took a sip, he leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, eyes locked on me like he was thinking something through. Then he said it. "I've noticed how you look at me." The words hit me like a shot of adrenaline. I nearly choked on my water. "What?" "You heard me." I tried to laugh it off, but the heat that rose to my face gave me away. I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do," he said quietly. He took a step forward, slow, deliberate. "You've been looking at me like that for a while now," he added. Long enough for me to stop pretending I don't notice. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Relax," he said with a faint smile. "I'm not mad. I wasn't trying to." I started, but he shook his head. "I'm not saying it's wrong," he interrupted. "Just saying, I've seen it." And then, even quieter. "And I haven't stopped thinking about it." I stood there, water bottle halfway to my lips, heart pounding loud enough that I was sure he could hear it. He hadn't moved since saying it. Just stood across from me, arms still folded, eyes on mine. Calm. like this was just another casual conversation between stepdad and stepson. Except it wasn't. Not even close. You haven't stopped thinking about it, I repeated slowly, just to make sure I hadn't imagined the words. Darren exhaled through his nose, like this had been building in him for a while. No, I haven't. I leaned against the workbench, needing the support. This is crazy. He nodded, almost to himself. Yeah, it is. But you're with my mom. I know. We sat in that quiet storm for a minute, the fan rattling behind us, the radio still murmuring from the shelf. Nothing's happened, he said finally. Not really. I haven't done anything. I wouldn't cross a line unless you... I didn't answer right away, because how the hell do you answer something like that? But the truth was, he was right. I had looked at him. Probably more than I should have. In the past few months, the way I'd caught myself staring at his back in the mornings when he made coffee shirtless, or the way I noticed how his voice changed when he was tired at night, a little deeper, a little softer, none of that was my imagination. It had been real, and now it was hanging between us. I didn't plan on any of this, I said quietly. I know, he said. Me neither. He pushed off the counter and walked toward the garage door, standing just at the threshold, looking out into the backyard. The sun had started to dip a little lower, turning the grass gold, casting long shadows across the driveway. His voice was lower now, almost like he was talking to himself. I think I just got used to pretending I didn't feel anything. It was easier than asking what it meant. I stepped up beside him, close enough that our arms were nearly touching. I thought I was the only one feeling it, I said. He turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw it, clear as day. The restraint, the conflict, the pull. You're not, he said. He looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't. Instead, he stepped back inside, shutting the garage door behind us with one hand, slow and quiet, like he didn't want to break the moment. We were alone again. Same garage, different air. He stood by the tool bench, his hand gripping the edge. I hadn't moved. You're an adult now, he said, not looking at me. I know. You know what this would mean if anything happened. I know that too. Finally, he looked up. Then why haven't you walked away yet? It wasn't a challenge. It was something else. Vulnerability. I'd never seen that in him before. Not like this. I stepped closer, slowly. I think, I said, because part of me doesn't want to. There was no dramatic music, no fireworks. Just two people standing in a dusty garage, surrounded by half-empty paint cans, power tools, and tension that had been simmering under the surface for months. Maybe longer. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe it was both of us at the same time. But suddenly we were inches apart. He looked down at me, jaw tight, breath shallow. This is probably a mistake, he murmured. I nodded. Probably. And then, just like that, his hand came up, cupping the side of my face with a kind of hesitancy I hadn't expected from someone like him. His thumb brushed the edge of my jaw. I've never done anything like this, he said. Me neither, I whispered, and then he kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't messy. It was slow, calculated almost, like he was still giving me a chance to pull away. But I didn't. I kissed him back. And for a moment, everything else, every reason why this shouldn't be happening, every risk, every consequence, faded into the background. All I felt was him, his hand, his breath, his body, steady and warm against mine. When we pulled apart, we didn't say anything right away. We just stood there, hearts racing, lips parted, eyes wide. I should, he started, voice raw. I should probably go cool off. Yeah, I said. Me too. But neither of us moved, because something had changed, and there was no going back. The garage felt different after that, like the air itself had shifted. Nothing looked out of place, but everything felt rearranged somehow, like we'd crossed some line and left a part of ourselves on the other side of it. Darren rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes darting to the floor. He looked like he was trying to come up with something to say, but couldn't settle on what. "Look," he finally muttered, "I don't want to make things weird." I let out a short breath. "Bit late for that, don't you think?" That made him chuckle, just barely. His eyes flicked back to mine. "Yeah, I guess it is." He sat on the old bar stool next to the workbench and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the cement floor. I stayed standing, still a little lightheaded from the kiss, trying to pretend like my skin wasn't buzzing. Neither of us moved for a while. The silence stretched again, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged. "I didn't plan for this," he said again, quietly, "but I haven't felt this in a long time." I looked at him carefully. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "Then, not since before your mom." There it was, the weight in the room. She's been distant for a while now," he added. "You've seen it?" I had. It wasn't a secret that things between Darren and my mom weren't exactly romantic anymore. They hadn't been for a while. I just hadn't asked questions, hadn't wanted to know the details. Still, hearing him say it out loud twisted something in my chest. "I'm not saying this to justify anything," he continued. "I'm saying it because I want to be honest. With you." I nodded slowly, and then I asked the question I hadn't let myself say until now. "Did you kiss me because you were lonely, or because you wanted to?" His eyes locked on mine. "Both." He stood up, walked a few steps, then turned to face me again. "But mostly because I wanted to." I swallowed hard. There was a part of me that still couldn't believe this was real, that I was standing in a hot garage with my stepdad, heart pounding, remembering how his lips had felt against mine. He stepped closer again. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "You didn't," I said, almost too fast. Then softer. "You haven't." A beat passed. Then his hand came up again, fingertips grazing the side of my neck, like he was making sure I was still there. "I've thought about this more times than I should admit," he whispered, "and I always told myself it was just curiosity, just a moment. But then you'd smile, or crack some dumb joke, or look at me the way you do, and it stopped feeling like something I could ignore." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I tried to shut it down, he added, but today I just couldn't. I stepped forward, closing the small distance between us until we were chest to chest. I could feel his breath against my face again. "I'm not asking you for anything," I said quietly. "I just don't want to pretend like it didn't happen." His hands settled on my hips, tentative but firm. "We can't do this here," he said. "Then where?" He looked toward the house, then back at me. "You still staying here tonight?" "Yeah." "My wife, your mom, is out until late. Dinner with a friend. She won't be back before 10. There was no question in his voice, but I knew what he was implying. "I'll be in my room," he said, his voice low, "if you want to talk more." Then he stepped back. The spell broke. He grabbed the last of the tools, coiled the extension cord, and turned off the fan. The silence returned, but it was different now, full of potential, of unspoken things. Before leaving, he looked back at me, eyes unreadable. "You don't have to come in. I won't hold it against you." I nodded. "Okay." Then he walked back into the house, and the garage door creaked shut behind him. I stood there for a few minutes, barely blinking, because I knew something had changed between us. And the hardest part wasn't figuring out if I wanted more. The hardest part was accepting that I already did. I didn't go inside right away. I stood in the garage, still holding the half-empty water bottle, trying to steady my thoughts. The air was thick, not just from the heat, but from everything that had just happened. The kiss, the conversation, the unspoken invitation. My mind felt like it was spinning and standing still at the same time. I wasn't naive. I knew what crossing that line would mean, but I also knew I wasn't walking away from it. Not tonight. By the time I made it inside, the house felt strangely quiet, like it knew something had changed. My mom's car wasn't in the driveway. She was still out, just like Darren said. I heard the faint hum of the TV from down the hall, probably some late afternoon sports recap playing in the background. I didn't go to my room. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water I didn't drink, then just stood there, listening, thinking, wanting. Eventually, I found myself walking down the hallway. His door was cracked open, just enough for the light from inside to spill across the carpet. I paused. My heart was thudding in my chest, way too loud for how quiet the house was. My hand hovered near the door, but I didn't knock. I just nudged it open a little further. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like he'd been doing the same thing I had, waiting, thinking, wondering. When he looked up and saw me, he didn't smile, but something in his eyes shifted. He stood slowly, like he didn't want to scare me off. "You sure?" he asked. I nodded, stepping inside. Yeah, still, we didn't rush anything. We stood across from each other like the space between us was something we had to cross carefully, and maybe it was. "I don't know what this is," I said, voice quiet. "I don't know what it means, but I don't want to lie about it anymore." His shoulders eased slightly, like he'd been holding in a breath. "Me neither." Then he reached for me again. Not in a way that demanded anything, but like he needed to make sure I was real. His hand landed on my waist, warm and steady, and I leaned into it. "I thought you were going to leave," he admitted, voice low. "I almost did," I said, but I couldn't. We stayed like that for a while, close, quiet, breathing the same air. There was no script, no plan. Just the slow, cautious unfolding of something that had been building for a long time. He kissed me again, slower this time, softer. His hand moved to the back of my neck, fingers brushing the edge of my hair, and I felt my body melt into his without thinking. It was different from before, less like testing a boundary, and more like stepping into something we both already knew was there. We didn't say much after that. Words felt clumsy. He pulled me toward the bed, and we sat side by side, thighs touching, hands resting between us. My fingers found his, and he laced them together without hesitation. "It's not just about the kiss," I said. "I know. I'm not just experimenting. I didn't think you were." That silence again, not awkward, just full. Then he said, "I don't want to mess you up." "You're not." He turned toward me slightly. "I mean it. I don't want to make you feel like this is something dirty or secret. You deserve better than that," I swallowed. "So do you." We sat in that space. No labels, no answers. Just something real, something heavy, something honest. Then he let go of my hand, only to reach up and gently touch my cheek again. "I don't want to be careful around you anymore," he said. "Not like that." "Then don't be." And just like that, we kissed again. Longer this time. More sure. It didn't need to lead anywhere. Not yet. It was enough to know that we'd both stopped pretending. That the energy between us wasn't just mine to carry alone. That he'd felt it too. And now, he wasn't hiding from it anymore. That night didn't become some cliche. There was no dramatic music. No wild stripping of clothes. No tangled limbs and a rush of heat. It was slower than that. Stranger. And way more intimate than I'd expected. We didn't even lie down at first. We just kept kissing. Pausing. Staring at each other like we were still surprised this was actually happening. He brushed my hair back with one hand, the other still resting lightly on my thigh. His touch had changed. No longer uncertain, but still careful, like he was learning me 1 inch at a time. "You ever done this before?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "Not with a guy?" He nodded, his expression unreadable for a second. "Same." That surprised me. I guess I'd always assumed he'd been around, seen more, done more. But maybe we were both carrying the same kind of confusion, the same kind of curiosity that turned into something deeper, without either of us really meaning it to. He leaned his forehead against mine and whispered, "I want to do this right." "You are," I said, and meant it. We shifted to the bed, lying down slowly, still fully clothed. I rested my head on his chest, and he wrapped an arm around me like it was the most natural thing in the world. It didn't feel wrong. It felt quiet, like a part of me that had always been humming finally got a response. We stayed like that for a long time, just breathing together. His hand moved in slow circles across my back, and every now and then, he'd tilt his head down to kiss the top of mine. There was something so grounding about it. His presence, the steady rise and fall of his chest beneath my cheek. It reminded me of being a kid, of those rare moments when you could let yourself be held without needing to pretend you were okay. I used to think I'd never feel this again, he murmured. Feel what? This, he said. The connection, the wanting, not just physical, but this closeness. I didn't know what to say, so I just held on to him tighter. We weren't talking about labels. We weren't trying to make sense of it. There was just this unspoken agreement between us now that whatever this was, it was ours, even if just for tonight. After a while, we drifted into a half-sleep. That kind where your mind floats but your body stays rooted by the warmth of the person next to you. I felt his breath steady, his muscles relax. And then, maybe an hour later, he stirred, and I did too. You okay? He asked, voice thick with sleep. Yeah, I said. You? He nodded. Better than I've felt in years. There was something raw in his voice. Something cracked open. I reached up and touched his face, traced the line of his jaw, the faint stubble that had grown in over the day. He kissed my fingers, then my wrist, and then met my eyes again. We should talk, he said. Tomorrow, I nodded. Okay. But not now. No, I agreed. Not now. So we didn't. We lay there, side by side, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling as the hours slipped by. It wasn't even about the kiss anymore. It was about finally being seen, about letting someone see all the parts you've kept hidden and not having them flinch or pull away. It was about him seeing me, and me seeing him, not as my stepdad, not as a label, but as a man who, somehow, had found his way into my heart. The next morning came too early. Light spilled through the curtains in a quiet way, as if it knew not to be too loud after what had happened. I blinked against it, disoriented for a moment, until I felt the weight of an arm still around my waist. Darren was behind me, breathing slow and even. His body was warm, and the room smelled like a mix of wood, clean cotton, and something distinctly his. I stayed still for a moment, not wanting to break the spell, but eventually, he stirred. His hand slid back slowly, like he wasn't sure if he should be touching me now that the sun was up. Hey, he murmured, his voice still gravelly from sleep. Hey, I whispered back. He shifted so we were facing each other. His hair was a little messy, eyes still heavy with sleep, but he looked peaceful, more open than I'd ever seen him. We stayed quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You still good?" I nodded. Yeah. Not freaking out? Only a little, I admitted, and he gave a short laugh. Fair enough. We lay there for a bit longer, the weight of what had happened starting to settle. It didn't feel wrong, but it did feel big. Bigger than either of us had probably expected. Eventually he sat up and rubbed his hands over his face. We should talk. Yeah, I said, sitting up too. My shirt was wrinkled, my hair all over the place, but I didn't care. I was more concerned about what was coming next. Darren turned to me, elbows on his knees. Last night wasn't a mistake. I know. But it also wasn't simple. Not something we can pretend didn't happen. I'm not pretending. He looked over at me, serious now. I care about you. I think I have for longer than I wanted to admit. My chest tightened. I hadn't expected him to say it like that. So plainly. No hesitation. I care about you too, I said, my voice low. But we need to figure out what this means, he said. For both of us. For your mom. For the house. The future. I know, I said again. Because I did. The real world was waiting just outside that bedroom door, and it wasn't going to be as quiet or forgiving as last night had been. He reached for my hand, fingers brushing mine. I'm not trying to scare you off. "You're not," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. After a while, we got up. We didn't make a big show of it, just two people getting dressed in quiet understanding. I grabbed my hoodie from the chair and glanced in the mirror before turning back to him. "I guess we just go on with our day?" He stepped over and rested his hands on my shoulders. "For now, yeah. And later? We'll talk again," he said. "We'll take this one step at a time." I nodded, and then, without thinking, I leaned in and kissed him one more time. It was brief, soft, but it said everything we weren't ready to say out loud yet. Then I left his room. The house was still silent. The smell of coffee lingered faintly from the kitchen. Outside, the sun was already rising higher, casting golden light across the hardwood floor. I walked down the hall to my room, heart full and head spinning. We hadn't solved anything. We hadn't made a plan. But we'd started something. Something I wasn't ready to walk away from. Not now. Not anymore. The days that followed were quiet, but not in a bad way. More like deliberate. Careful. Darren and I didn't pretend nothing had happened, but we didn't announce it either. We still moved around each other the way we always had, passing in the kitchen, brushing shoulders in the hallway, but now there was a weight behind every glance. A hum beneath the surface. We were both waiting to see what came next. It was a weird balance. At dinner, we still sat at the table with my mom, passing the salad bowl, making small talk about news and weather and errands. Darren didn't act strange. He didn't slip up, but I noticed how often he'd glance at me when she wasn't looking. I noticed how his fingers tapped the table when he was thinking. And I noticed how the silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full. By the end of that week, I found him outside again. In the garage, same as before. He was working on something with the engine of the old mower. Hands dirty, shirt clinging to him in the late afternoon heat. It hit me then, how much of this had been building. How many little things I'd ignored. "How's it running?" I asked, stepping inside. He looked up, gave a faint smirk. "Still a piece of shit." I laughed and grabbed a rag, tossing it to him. We worked side by side for a while. No big talk, just passing tools, wiping sweat, fixing the mess together. It felt natural in a way I didn't expect. Eventually, he said, "You going back to school next week?" "Yeah, Tuesday." He nodded. "And after that?" I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, standing up straighter and meeting my eyes, "do you want to keep this going?" The question was simple, but the way he asked it felt like more than just romance. It felt like risk, like he was offering something fragile and real and breakable. "I don't know what it looks like," I said. "But yeah, I do." He wiped his hands on his jeans, then came closer. "I've been thinking about what you said, about not pretending." "Yeah," he nodded. "I've done a lot of pretending in my life, but I don't want to do that with you." He touched my jaw, soft and familiar now. "Even if we have to be careful, I want you in my life." My throat tightened. I didn't think I'd hear him say it like that. "I want that too," I said, and I meant it. We didn't kiss in the garage this time. It was different. More settled, like we both knew that the biggest shift had already happened, and now it was just about learning how to carry it. Later that night, when I was packing my bag, he knocked softly on my door. "Leaving early?" he asked. "Yeah, trying to beat traffic." He lingered in the doorway. "You gonna text me?" I smiled. "Probably too much." "Good." Then he stepped inside and hugged me, tight, with both arms, like he didn't care if it felt too long. And for a second, it didn't matter where we were or who we were to each other, it just felt right. When I pulled away, he looked me in the eye and said, "I don't regret what happened, not 1 second of it." Me neither. I left the next morning with his number saved under a new name in my phone. Just his first name, just Darren. And that was the beginning of something I never expected, but maybe always wanted. Something real.